Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving deep into freedom of speech in America today.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, you guys sent in so much great stuff, like historical documents and legal cases,
Yeah.
that we're just gonna dig right into it, see what we find.
Cool.
So by the end, you'll know, not just what this right means, but also how it's changed over time.
Oh, for sure. It's not a simple thing.
No,
It's always evolving. It's always being challenged,
right.
debated.
Yeah, it's like a living part of our democracy, not just some old words on a page.
Exactly. And it didn't just appear out of nowhere either, right?
Right. So First Amendment, where'd it come from? It's not like it just magically, poof, appeared in the Constitution.
No, no magic here. One of the sources you sent actually talks about James Madison, his original drafts.
Oh, cool.
It's super interesting to see his thought process. He was really looking at stuff like the Virginia Declaration of Rights, the English Bill of Rights.
So he was drawing on a bunch of different sources, not just...
Yeah, a whole lineage of ideas about, people being able to speak their minds and challenge the powers that be.
I love that. Challenging the powers that be, yeah.
Yeah.
So those are the roots. But Madison's version, what makes it unique, he didn't just, copy and paste, right?
Right. What stood out to me was how he connected free speech with the idea of self-government.
Mm.
It wasn't just about letting people rant. It was about making sure citizens could actually criticize the government, openly debate stuff.
Oh, that makes total sense.
Yeah, he saw that as super important for a democracy to actually work.
Like, if the government can just shut you up whenever they want, that's the opposite of freedom, right?
Totally. And speaking of history, it's funny, one of Madison's original amendments wasn't actually ratified until 1992.
White.
Crazy, right? The 27th Amendment.
Wow. So it took, over 200 years for that one to become official. What's it even about?
Well, it's not about free speech directly. It's actually about congressional salaries.
Oh, interesting.
But still, wild that it took that long.
Yeah. Okay, so we got the First Amendment. It says speech, but what does that really even mean?
Yeah, it's definitely not just about, standing on a soapbox yelling at people.
No, for sure.
You sent some court cases that really show how broad the interpretation of speech can be.
Okay.
We're talking writing, publishing, actions that are symbolic, even stuff like what you choose to wear or read.
Wow, so it's not just about talking. It's about expressing ideas in any way you can.
Yeah. The courts have recognized that expression takes a ton of forms. It's not limited to just words coming out of your mouth.
So burning a flag in protest,
Mm-hmm.
wearing a T-shirt with a controversial message, those could all be considered protected speech.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, yes. The big takeaway is the First Amendment is about protecting the expression of ideas no matter how that expression happens.
I like that. But there's got to be some limits, right? You can't just, run around doing whatever you want in the name of free speech.
You're absolutely right. It's broad, but it's not a free pass.
Right.
And the sources you sent actually outline some of those limits really well.
Okay, so hit me with some examples, what kind of speech isn't protected?
So one that's probably familiar is incitement to imminent lawless action. Have you heard that classic example about yelling fire in a crowded theater?
Oh, yeah.
That kind of thing. The important thing is that the speech has to be aimed at causing immediate violence, something illegal.
So just being angry, even yelling, isn't enough. It's got to be a real direct call to action that could cause harm.
Right, exactly. Another category is fighting words, which isn't just about actual fighting. It's more about speech that's so inflammatory, so directed at one person,
Yeah.
that it's almost guaranteed to provoke violence, right then and there.
Like the legal version of poking a bear, right?
Exactly. But defining what actually counts as fighting words, that can get super tricky.
Yeah, I bet. What's offensive to one person might not be to another.
Totally. And the Supreme Court's been careful with this one. They know context is everything. It's not just about being mean. It's got to be the verbal equivalent of a punch.
There was a case in one of the sources, Bennett v. Hendricks. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Someone put up flyers calling this guy a convicted criminal, which was totally false.
Right. Yeah.
Didn't cause a fight or anything.
Yeah.
But it's a good example of how words can do real damage, even without physical violence.
Exactly. It shows that even if speech falls outside these neat categories, it can still have consequences, maybe even legal ones.
So where's the line then? How do we figure out what's protected and what's not?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. So we were talking about that line, that tricky line between what's protected speech and what's not.
Yeah.
And another category that gets kind of hard to define is true threats. This isn't just angry words. It's about actually intending to make someone scared for their safety, even their life.
So context matters a lot here.
Yeah.
yelling at someone during a game that's different from, say, a threat that makes you fear for your safety.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
all about the intent behind the words. There's a case, Virginia v. Black, that dealt with cross-burning, which, has a horrible history.
Yeah, definitely.
And the court said, yeah, in some situations, stuff like that, it's clearly meant to threaten, not just express an opinion.
Wow, that's like a really powerful example. Speech can be used to like control people, make them afraid to speak up.
Yeah, it's a way to silence dissent, for
Yeah.
sure. And then we get to a category that even the Supreme Court has had trouble defining: obscenity.
Ah, yeah. Obscenity, the whole I know it when I see it thing.
All right.
But there's got to be some rules, right?
There are rules, but they're pretty vague, open to interpretation. The Miller v. California case, it set out this three-part test.
Okay.
Basically, for something to be obscene, it's got to be like appealing to prurient interests, offensive to the average person, and it can't have any real value, like artistic or political.
So it can't just be shocking. It has
Yeah.
to be all three of those things. Seems like that'd be tough to like actually use in real life.
You're right, because what's prurient or offensive, it totally changes from person to person, community to community.
Exactly.
That's why obscenity cases are so hard. Plus, there's the whole question of like redeeming value. Who decides what's art and what's just, offensive?
Right. It's such a tricky area. And it feels like the legal system is constantly trying to keep up with like how society changes and technology too.
Totally.
Speaking of which, what about defamation? Isn't that a type of speech that can get you in trouble?
Oh, absolutely. Defamation, which includes libel, the written kind, and slander, the spoken kind.
Okay.
It's all about false statements that hurt someone's reputation. The key is they got to be provably false, not just your opinion.
So you can't just spread gossip or lies without consequences.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
But what about like opinions? Are those protected even if they're negative?
That's a really important distinction. Fact versus opinion. Opinions, even harsh ones, are generally protected. The courts get that. In a free society, you got to be able to express your views,
Yeah.
even if others disagree, without being afraid of lawsuits.
Makes sense, because then you could
Right.
never criticize a politician or a movie.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
need that freedom for open discussion. Of
Okay.
course, where the line is between fact and opinion, that can get blurry sometimes.
Yeah, I can see that getting complicated. Okay, and the last one on our list of unprotected speech is harassment, which seems really relevant these days with all the online stuff.
Oh, for sure. Harassment isn't just one mean comment. It's about a pattern of behavior
Yeah.
that's so severe, so constant, that it creates a hostile environment. This comes up a lot in workplaces, schools, and definitely online.
So it's not just about saying something offensive once, it's about repeatedly targeting someone, making them feel unsafe.
Exactly. It's about creating that atmosphere of like intimidation or abuse. And often it's based on things like race, gender, religion.
With protected characteristics, right?
Right. And courts will look at like how often it happens, how serious it is, whether it's actually interfering with someone's life.
This whole conversation has been really eye-opening. Like, the First Amendment protects a lot of speech, but it also recognizes that there are limits, to keep people safe, to make society fair.
That's a great point. And it actually leads us to one of the most debated parts of free speech today: hate speech.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Seems like every time I'm on social media, there's another controversy about hate speech and whether it should be banned.
It's a huge topic, and I think there's a lot of confusion about what it even means, legally speaking, and how it's handled under the First Amendment.
I'm all ears. Let's unpack this hate speech thing. Okay, so hate speech. Where do we even start with this? Like, is there even a legal definition in the U.S.? It feels like everyone's using the term, but I'm not sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, that's the thing. Unlike those other categories, hate speech doesn't have like a neat little legal definition here.
Okay.
It's more like a societal concept referring to speech that people find, deeply offensive, usually targeting things like race, religion, gender, sexual orientation.
So just because something is like awful, hateful,
Wow.
it doesn't automatically mean it's illegal.
You got it. And here's where the First Amendment gets super interesting, even controversial. Our sources are clear. Even really repugnant hate speech, it's generally protected under the First Amendment.
Hold on, wait. Why would the founders protect speech that's specifically designed to, like, hurt people, put them down, dehumanize them? That doesn't seem very free and open to me.
Yeah, it's a tough one. A lot of people struggle with this. The thinking is the government shouldn't be the one deciding which ideas are okay and which ones aren't.
Okay.
Remember, the founders, they were really worried about censorship.
Right.
They believed even offensive speech had to have some protection to prevent tyranny.
I see. So if you give the government the power to silence one kind of speech, then they could just silence anything they don't like.
Exactly, it's a slippery slope. But then the question becomes, doesn't that let hate speech just run wild?
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
It's a balance, for sure. A lot of legal scholars argue the best way to deal with bad speech is with more speech, better speech,
Okay.
stronger arguments, education, open debate, the marketplace of ideas concept.
So don't try to shut down the hate. Try to drown it out with, like, good ideas and positive messages.
Yeah.
Sounds good, but also kind of idealistic.
It is, definitely. And it's a constant struggle, especially with, the internet, social media.
Oh, yeah.
Those platforms have given a voice to people who were silenced before, but they've also become, like, breeding grounds for hate.
And misinformation, too. Right.
Exactly. And this whole thing about who gets to control speech, the government versus private companies, it reminded me of something in our sources, Ken Paulson's 7 key points about the First Amendment.
Oh, yeah, he had some good insights.
He did. One that's really relevant here is the First Amendment, it protects you from the government censoring you, but it doesn't necessarily apply to private companies like those social media giants.
Ah, that's a big difference. So the government can't stop me from posting something controversial on Facebook, but Facebook itself can take it down or even ban me.
Exactly. Those companies have a ton of power over what we see and say online, even if it doesn't always line up perfectly with the First Amendment.
It's like they're making their own little free speech zones.
Yeah, with their own rules.
Yeah.
And it's a huge debate how to balance free speech with preventing harm, especially when these companies are so influential.
Wow, this has been a wild ride. It's not just about those big court cases. It's about what we do online every day, the choices we make about what we say, what we share.
I'm glad you brought that up. The internet, it's created amazing opportunities, but also challenges we've never seen before when it comes to free speech.
Definitely.
Understanding our rights, but also our responsibilities as, like, digital citizens, that's more important than ever.
Couldn't agree more. This deep dive has given me so much to think about.
Me too. What I love about the First Amendment is it's alive. It's changing as our world changes. New technology, social norms, that tension between freedom and responsibility, it never ends.
So true. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you next time.